Hi guys, so I will be talking about the violence against African Americans during the Red Summer of 1919 and the Black Wall Street Massacre. So, what was the Red Summer of 19? It was during summer and fall of 1919, where racial tensions arose, mainly due to post-World War One. A lot of African American communities were being targeted, and there was a widespread of violence in the North and South of the United States. African Americans were getting their communities torn down, they were getting abused and killed all over the place, and it really led to a social and political impact across the whole world. So, we begin talking about the racial discrimination across the United States in terms of the Red Summer of 1919. As you can see in the map, the states circled are where the Red Summer took place across the United States. So we have Washington, D.C., Nebraska, Texas, Illinois, Arkansas, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, New York, and Tennessee. I forgot to circle that one, but Tennessee was also being affected by the Red Summer of 1919. During this time, there was a lot of segregation, social inequality. African Americans were being denied the right to vote. They were the targets of threats and harassment, and most Black families were forced to flee from the state where they were at because the justice system was so biased against them. And most of the justice system just stood by and let things happen. And Black people were also often denied to live in certain neighborhoods. So, we now are talking about the riots that happened during this time. This was basically what made up the Red Summer of 1919. These riots where white mobs would just go around and harass African Americans, and they would want them out of the community, and they did the unimaginable to keep them out. Uh, as most of you know, the most serious outbreak occurred in Chicago in late July of 1919, which is known as the Chicago Race Riot of 1919. Many people were killed, both white and black, but African Americans did suffer higher casualties. Uh, 38 people were killed and 537 injured people during Chicago's Red Summer Riot. If you look to the left, there's a picture of a lovely lady, and she is actually a survivor of the Red Summer Riot. Uh, that interview of her in that picture was taken 5 years ago when NBC did a report on her. So I'm not sure if she's still alive, but she talks about her experience as a very young child seeing that happen in her community. She talks about how scared, how terrified the community was, and how she endured, and how amazing it was to see her community still stand strong, even though there was acts of violence all over the place. Uh, Later on, we talk about two of the other worst riots that occurred in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Rosewood, Florida, in June of 1921, where both black and whites engaged in lots of fighting. The impacts and the aftermath of the Red Summer of 19 were very painful. They were very bittersweet. The pros of this event were that there was an increase in awareness of racial injustice and discrimination. There was growth of many civil rights movements and organizations, as we learn in upcoming chapters in our book. There was increase of political activity in Black communities. A lot of Black voices were coming up to the scene, and the promotion of cultural renaissance started to come in play. As we read in our textbook, we get to know that blues and jazz and Black actresses and actors, they start to come around and they start to share their gifts with the world. Now, the cons of this event are obviously the trauma and psychological impact that these people went through, and they still continue to struggle for equal rights even after everything happened and all the violence. The violence continued, and the resistance to change and opportunities for African Americans stayed the same. There wasn't much going on except that the fact that they were still being discriminated. Now we're talking about Black Wall Street, and this was a huge massacre, also known as a Tulsa Race Massacre, that happened from May 31st to June 1st of 1921. As you can see here in these images, these are pictures of homes being destroyed, in the Black community, and the picture on the top is of people looking for things to live off of after the massacre. So how did this happen? Well, we began with how the population of Black people started to come into Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was because there was a major oil boom, and lots of people came in because they wanted better jobs and better economic opportunities, and they were fleeing from the Jim Crow South. Although in Tulsa there were still Jim Crow laws. They persisted in Tulsa, but they weren't as strong. But the Jim Crow laws did cause a segregation in Tulsa, and African Americans resided in the northern side of town, while the whites often resided in the southern side. And we learn about Greenwood, which was a main commercial street in Tulsa in the Black community, which the white people referred to as Little Africa. And we also learn about the white envy during this period of time, and violence was very dominant during this time of African American history. So we begin with talking about Greenwood's prosperity before the attack, before the massacre. And Greenwood was a commercial district, and it was a self-sufficient community of Black wealth and pride. There were in this picture, as you can see, this is the main street where there were plenty of stores, nightclubs, hotels, banks, etc. These people who live in this community, they had brought up the whole community, and they were being so successful. Excuse me. As many of you know, J.B. Stratford, he bought a bunch of land in Tulsa, and he believed that the community should work together in order to succeed economically. And that's when a bunch of Black-owned settlements started to pop up, and the community began to succeed. So, what triggered this massacre? The causes of this massacre were a lot of things, but what we know is, racial and discrimination, white supremacy, all those things. But white folks were actually envious of the prosperity of Greenwood. Many businesses were much more successful than those of white people, and that's why racial and economic tensions began to boil in May of 1921. Dick Rowland, who was a Black 19-year-old, he was a shoe shiner, and he was on his way to an elevator to go to a restroom. And in that elevator was a young lady, a young white lady, a 17-year-old lady named Sarah Page, who was working the elevator that day. And no one really knows what happened there, but Dick Rowland was accused of sexual assault. And the white mob became furious and set out for destruction into Greenwood. As you can see in these pictures, their community was being completely destroyed. Houses, churches, banks, all their businesses were being destroyed, and they left them in economic disparity. And in the picture up top, you can see a woman sitting in the back of a car, and that was a picture that described how some people just fled Tulsa after the violence began. Local officers also participated in this violence, and Black men who served in World War One risked their lives to protect their community and their families. Um, Around 300 Black people were brutally murdered. The rest were left homeless and severely injured with little to no resources. Now, after that, violence still continued, and in Rosewood, Florida, which was very similar to Greenwood, it was a booming Black community that was self-sufficient and brought up from dust up. These attacks were also racially motivated, and once again, a black man was being charged with sexual assault against a white woman. Black people were forced to flee and hide, and the white mob attacked the town at dusk, slaughtering animals and destroying buildings one by one until there was nothing or little to nothing left. No one was charged for these murders, but later on, I think the people who suffered from the murders were compensated with money. So the lasting impacts of these also made a pros and cons chart. The pros being that the legal efforts for equality started to increase a bit more. State compensation for victims for the Rosewood Massacre. They were compensated with money, as I said before. And the cons, obviously, the psychological trauma, economic devastation, and lack of awareness and suppression of history. I don't know about you guys, but I never learned about these things in high school, which just shows the lack of awareness there is in our community. In this picture here, you can see this is Greenwood after the massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this shows a picture of the community being rebuilt a few years later. They had little to no help, so it took a while to bring this community back up. And these are my references. Thank you so much.